Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. It's where we challenge men to redefine success, to lead with integrity, and to create a lasting impact. And today I'm your host, Alan DeMonto, and we're going to tackle some of the great challenges that we faced in our modern world. And today, the challenge we're going to tackle is being grounded amid all of this uncertainty. And so in a world where everything really seems to change in constant flux, whether that being in business or relationships, finances, even our own sense of purpose, it's going to be pretty easy, I think, for us to feel like we're standing on shaky ground. And the truth is that uncertainty is going to be inevitable. And so the real question isn't about having uncertainty, it's how do we navigate it without losing ourselves in today's chaos. And so most men, typically, we're going to react in one of two ways. We're either going to shut down and avoid making decisions, or we're going to react impulsively. And so letting fear dictate what our next move is going to be could be very dangerous for ourselves. And so if I told you that there's a way for us to stay centered and calm and truly be in control no matter what life throws at us. And so in today's episode, we're going to break this all down for you with the myths that keep men stuck in our fear and the mind shifts that build unshakable resilience, and provide you a powerful strategy or some strategies that help you so you can stay grounded when it really feels completely uncertain. And if you're ready to take control and lean into this, because this episode could be the change for everything that you need in this moment. Before we get started, there's something very important that I want you to do for me and do for other men. And that is, if this topic resonates with you, I'd like you to hit the like button, subscribe to our podcast, and drop a comment telling me the biggest area of uncertainty that you're faced with right now. You see, when men like you engage, it helps us spread the word and the message, and it empowers more men to take control of their lives. So just take 2 seconds, hit like, subscribe, and let's get this conversation going. Why don't we? And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Revolutionary Man podcast. And before we get started, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. When was the last time uncertainty held you back from making a bold move? And as you're considering that, what was the impact as fear has had on the unknown, and how that's had a hold on you for your leadership, in your relationships, and in your confidence? And if you could navigate uncertainty with complex or complete clarity and confidence, how would your life be different? These aren't questions. These are things to help us start thinking and reframing our point for reclaiming control of our lives. And so as we dive into today's conversation, consider these questions, and I'm sure many more are going to come up for you. So the first thing I want to talk about is the psychology behind uncertainty. And uncertainty is going to be one of those great stressors that many of us can face, and we all face it at some level in some way, shape, or form. Isn't it true? Because it triggers fear, it brings self-doubt, and it's hesitation. And these three things alone can be the things that kill our momentum in both our personal and our professional life. And so understanding how our brain responds to uncertainty is the first step in learning for us how to stay grounded, even when everything feels completely unstable around us. So we're going to recognize that the biological and psychological mechanisms that are going to be at play here can shift us from reacting with fear to responding more in control. So how could uncertainty create stress? That's pretty basic, don't you think? The brain's reaction to this is completely unknown, right? Our brain is just wired for survival. It doesn't matter what age we're living in, we're always wired for just to be able to survive, not necessarily for success. So when we're faced with that little bit of uncertainty, or maybe it's a lot of uncertainty, the amygdala, that brain has this fear, it's our fear center, interprets it as a potential threat. And we know this, right? This is basic psychology 101. And it's when we get into that mode, though, that it triggers our fight or flight or fawn response. And these are truly primal reactions. And it's useful when we're dealing with physical danger for sure. But in our modern life, it's going to often manifest as anxiety, stress, and avoidance. And so most of us try to combat this stress by really seeking some immediate certainty. And we can do that by a lot of different ways. We have these impulsive decisions, right? Or we're going to shut down just to avoid the issue and altogether. And other things that end up by having is that when we do that, neither that approach will going to lead to long-term stability or even success for us. And so when we look at it from a male perspective, this is when we have this pressure where we always have to have the answers, right? And I know I have that on many occasions, and that we need to be this provider and to maintain control. And while all of that is so true, what makes uncertainty feel like a personal failure rather than this inevitable part of life is when we start to think that we're unworthy or not able to handle this. And so that's what gets us to feel this unstableness in our lives. And whether we're looking at that from a financial perspective or just in our relationships and even in our business. And so when we start to internalize this as men, this stress can really be challenging for us. And we need to be able to figure out how we can deal with that head on. And so really that decision looks like a lot of different ways when we're in this fight and flight and fawn mode. So sometimes that can come from decision paralysis, right? The old analysis of paralysis, where we're not really taking on and really doing things. It can lead to burnout because we're on the other side of that spectrum. So we're overworking it. And we're always in this state of unease. And maybe you're holding that in your body, you're holding that in your chest and your short breaths, and you're feeling tightness in your body. And so these are key things for us to be aware of and to know and understand what's happening for us, so we can start to get in front of these times of uncertainty. And so think about it. You're an entrepreneur and you're experiencing this. Maybe it's a dip in revenue. There aren't many sales aren't happening as like you'd like it to see it. And so instead of adapting, we avoid making some adjustments in our business. And even though we have this thoughts of failure, it becomes far too overwhelming for us. And so what happens is that we don't take the action that we need to. And instead of doing that, we ultimately cause our true downfall in our business. And so the reality is that for many of us is uncertainty shouldn't ruin us, but it should give us the ability to handle what's going on. And so let's talk about what those costs are, right? We're in these moments. And so when we avoid dealing with our uncertainty, it leads to stagnation. We just finished chatting about that, right? It's so when we have this, we avoid doing anything for personal growth. We avoid taking that next step. And even if it's the smallest and simplest thing. And so what happens is we just stay in our comfort zone. It's where we want to feel safe. Think of your comfort zone as maybe in a moment of high stress and this uncertainty. It's like standing on a tea towel. It's not very big, is it? It's just barely enough to put your 2 feet on it, and you don't really want to step outside of it. But I guarantee you that the more that we stay in this, we're going to remain stuck. And while we're doing that, the world and everything around us is going to move forward. And so whether it's staying in a dead-end job that you're not happy with, or you're avoiding those tough and challenging conversations you need to have when you're with your family, or you're just refusing to take any calculated risk, the cost of avoiding doing any of those is long-term. In the long run, it's going to be regret. And that's a far heavier weight to carry than it is to face what we need to face. So we're really talking about the difference between short-term comfort and long-term regret. And so for most of us, they trade our potential for temporary security. But the problem is that the more that we avoid this uncertainty, the less capable we become at handling it when inevitably is going to come our way. And so again, think about that, the decisions in your life, the times when you've avoided, maybe it was asking for a raise, or you're starting a business and you're concerned at a fear of rejection, and maybe being uncomfortable, and maybe being too uncomfortable right now. But if you think about it and you took a little bit of action, 5 years down the road, you could be stuck in the same place and still haven't taken any action. Just think about the regret that piles on. And so here's the uncomfortable truth. that certainty is a myth. There's no amount of preparation that's going to eliminate uncertainty entirely. We're always going to have some. The key isn't to chase uncertainty. It's to become so mentally and emotionally strong that uncertainty doesn't shake us. When I think of Tony Robbins and a quote that he has, and he says, the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you can comfortably live with. Think about that for a moment. The quality of our life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty that we can comfortably live with. It's pretty powerful if you ask me. So how do we stay grounded in uncertainty? If we already recognize that uncertainty is inevitable, the only way forward is to develop tools and to help us navigate through these moments of uncertainty with confidence. And so the difference between those of men who thrive under uncertainty and those who crumble is going to be their ability to shift their mindset, to develop really strong mental habits and to take control of their focus. And so we're going to start by the first strategy and tool I'm going to offer for you is just a reframe. And reframing is that uncertainty as an opportunity. Uncertainty is not going to be the enemy. It's going to be a gateway, the pathway forward for growth. And so every time that we're faced with a challenge that for us to overcome, it's going to start with uncertainty, isn't it? We're stepping into unknown. So instead of seeing this uncertainty as a threat, we're going to train ourselves to see it as, man, here's an opportunity for me to evolve and to grow. And so those that choose to take that aren't the ones who are going to avoid uncertainty altogether, but they're going to be the ones who are going to step in it head on, and they're going to extract whatever lesson they can from that experience. So then the next piece we're going to look at is we're going to shift from what if I fail to a different conversation in our mind. It says, what if this is the best thing that's ever happened to me? Instead on focusing on what's going to go wrong, obviously, let's start visualizing what can go right. Our subconscious mind is pretty powerful, and it's going to respond to any question that we're going to ask it. So if you're going to ask it, what if this goes wrong? Guess what you're going to find out? You're going to find out all the reasons how it's going to go wrong. Well, maybe that's a great mitigation strategy and a small step to take. But I challenge you, if you flip that question around and start to ask your brain about what are the solutions instead of the problem that you're faced with, you're going to have a much more empowering answers that are going to come forward. And so again, we'll go back to the idea of being entrepreneurs. This is something that many of us strive to do and to become. And so if two business owners are faced in an economic downturn and one panics, cuts back, and starts to play defense, and the other one chooses to see this as a disruption, as a chance to pivot, so they begin to innovate and then they start to take advantage while others are going to be retreating. Who would you rather be, the first business owner or the second business owner? Because I offer for your consideration, that first business owner is probably going to have a collapsing business, and the other business owner is going to have an opportunity to build a thriving business. So in order to get there, we need to build some mental toughness. And so what are some things that we can do throughout the day to help us truly build mental resilience and mental toughness? And so it isn't really, when we think about resilience isn't built in crisis. It's going to be trained daily. So we can't wait for shit to happen. We have to be training ourselves on every given moment and every given day. And so we don't develop our emotional and mental strength when uncertainty hits. You develop it in the months and the years leading up to it. And so think about it. It's just like going to the gym, and practicing mental toughness is built on consistent training and exposing ourselves to controlled discomfort. So how do we do that? What are some key practices that we can consider to implement in our lives to help build mental toughness? The first one, as I just mentioned, it was physical discipline. It's everything from cold showers to weightlifting to endurance training to push us beyond our mental barriers. And when we can do that, then we start to strengthen who we are, because no longer are we allowing our ego mind to dictate who we are. Mindfulness and a controlled breathing exercises. One of the things that we're seeing more and more, and I'm seeing especially more and more in doing men's work, is really helping men understand and get into their bodies and recognize what's happening. And how, again, we talked a little earlier in today's episode about how's your breathing? Have you slowed down your breathing? Have you been able to be in control of that part of that process? What kind of mindfulness practice do you have to stop to meditate, to journal, to do any of these things? When you start to do these practices and have a bit of self-reflection, it's going to help us process this uncertainty that's sitting in our minds and in our lives. And then that's how we're going to extract and pull all the lessons that's happening, instead of having us react emotionally to what's happening around us. And so I always like the idea of the image of a boxer who's thinking about, okay, he's going to get ready to go into his big boxing match, but instead of start training, he just waits, right? And because he imagines that he's just never going to be ready. And so when you think about that, if you were going to get into a boxing match, you'd start training today, wouldn't you? And see, but most resilient men, they're going to train daily. And so they get prepared for whatever comes their way. And you can do that too if you consider yourself the boxer in your life, and being prepared and practicing and training every day gets you ready for when the moment comes that you need to step into that ring. So the next thing I want you to consider is, what are the things that you can control, and then just let go of the rest. Most of our anxiety is going to come from trying to control the uncontrollable. And so when you can't control things like the economy, other people's opinions, any unforeseen challenges, those are the things that are going to drive you up the wall. And those are the things that are going to make life difficult. But when you stop to think about what you are in control in any situation, you're in control of your mindset, you're in control of how you prepare, and you're in control of how you respond. And so the more that we focus on the things that are outside of our control, the more challenges we're going to have. They call that an external locus of control, right? And instead, we want to focus on the internal locus of control, all the things that I'm able to handle, and even going into understanding and paying attention to our body's reactions. And so what does this controllable formula look like? So I'm going to give you a little formula to help you really put this together. So you're going to think about, what can you control? Okay, I can control my work ethic. I can control my emotional state. I can control my ability to adapt. What can't I control? I can't control the past. I can't control other people's reactions, and I can't control the future. So when I start to shift my focus entirely from that first list, then I can free myself from making the necessary changes that I need to in my life. And so I want to tell you a little bit of a story about a gentleman. His name's James, and James has always been a man with a plan, and he's had a steady career. He's got a growing family and a clear trajectory for success. But one Monday morning, everything changed for James. His company had announced massive layoffs, and he was one of them. And just like that, the job he had poured years of effort into was gone. There's no warning, no backup plan, just a severance check and an empty calendar. And as he walked out of the office with the box of his belongings, his mind raced with questions. What now? How will I provide for my family? Am I even good enough to start over? And his stomach tightened, of course, with anxiety, and the cold sweat formed on his brow. And he had spent his whole life believing that hard work created security. But now James was faced with the unknown, and he felt completely powerless. And so, for the first time in years, James is standing in an uncertain ground, and he had no idea what to do next. So soon, those days turned into weeks, and the uncertainty consumed him. And his morning routine, once built upon the purpose and structure, now felt meaningless. And so he stopped waking up early. His workouts became inconsistent, and every job application he submitted felt like a desperate attempt to regain control. And the rejection emails started to pile up, each one another punch to his already fragile confidence and ego. And so he withdrew from his wife and his kids, and not wanting them to see the fear behind his eyes, that it might be staring at and at night he'd sit there, just stare at the ceiling, haunted by thoughts of failure. But as with anything in life, there comes a moment that everything changed. And then one evening, while sitting in the dark, strolling mindlessly through his phone, he came across a quote. It said, "The quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty you are comfortable to live with." Isn't that an interesting quote, my friends? And he read it again, and it was as if the words were speaking directly to him. And for weeks, he had been trying to escape uncertainty, waiting for the feeling of stability to come back. But what if it wasn't the answer? And what if certainty was never going to come, and the only way forward was for James to embrace the unknown? So James realized that the men he admired most, those business leaders, the athletes, the warriors, they didn't avoid uncertainty. They thrived in it. They didn't wait for clarity to act. They just acted despite of having any clarity. And he had been lacking and really looking at what the uncertainty as this enemy to his life. But what if the very thing would make him much, much stronger? And so that night, James made a decision. He was going to stop reacting to uncertainty, and he's going to start preparing. And he couldn't control the job market, but he could control how he approached it. And so he continued. He couldn't guarantee his immediate success, but he could guarantee that he would be mentally and physically ready for whatever came next. And so he went back to setting his alarm for 5 a.m. and he committed to rebuilding himself inside out. He started journaling every morning, writing out his fears and countering them with his actions. So slowly, James started to rebuild his morning workout routine, and not for his physical health alone, but to train his mind for discipline. He applied for jobs with a different mindset, one of abundance instead of scarcity. He stopped seeing the rejection as failure and started seeing it as feedback. Every no was just another step toward the right yes. And his wife noticed the change first. She said, "You seem different, James," she said one morning over coffee. And as he heard that, the man that once led an uncertain life and was truly paralyzing him, he was now facing it with confidence. And it's not because the uncertainty had disappeared, but because he had developed the resilience to handle it. And so it took about 6 months, and James was not just surviving, but he was thriving, and he had landed a new job, and one that was a better aligned to his long-term goals. But the real transformation wasn't his career, it was truly in his mindset. He was no longer driven for the need for external stability, and he had created stability within himself. And James understood the certainty was truly an illusion, and true confidence came from his ability to navigate the unknown. And so as he was sitting at home one evening and he was playing catch with the son in the backyard, he realized something incredibly powerful. His children weren't watching how he handled success. They were watching how he handled adversity. And for the first time in his life, he felt he was setting the right example. Now, because James learned that uncertainty wasn't the enemy, it was his greatest teacher. And because of that, he would never fear the unknown again. And so uncertainty is going to be inevitable. That feeling lost, anxious, or reactive doesn't have to be. And the strongest men are the ones that are going to are really going to be the ones who eliminate uncertainty. They're the ones who master their ability to navigate it. So following practical strategies is going to give you this battle-tested framework to help you stay grounded, focused, and resilient no matter what challenges come your way. So let's practice some radical acceptance as our first battle-tested strategy. And so why is that important? It's important because most of us waste our energy resisting uncertainty. And so trying to control our outcomes, overanalyzing worst case scenarios, or just waiting for this perfect moment to act. This is going to only lead to frustration and paralysis. We know that. We've talked about that at length today. And so radical acceptance means for us to fully accept that uncertainty is going to be a part of life. It is what life is all about, and that fighting it is only going to make it worse. And so once we stop resisting, we can free up this extra energy now to focus on what actually we can control. And so whenever you find yourself feeling anxious about the unknown, I just want you to pause for a moment and ask, am I focusing on something I can control, or am I resisting reality? And then write down what's outside of your control, and then just start crossing it off. And then redirect your focus to the actions within your own power. So we're going to train our minds now for this radical acceptance is that I may not control the situation, but I can control how I respond. And so think about if I continue to think that I'm just having to work harder so I can eliminate uncertainty, we already know we're going to be in the same position that James is in, right? And so there isn't going to be any amount of planning that's going to remove uncertainty. It's learning to be able to adapt for real power. And so I'm not saying to not plan, I'm saying, yes, make your plan, there's still going to be uncertainty as you execute it. So stay focused on executing it. And then we're going to move to the second part of this battle-tested plan, and that's control what you can framework. And so it's important because anxiety and overwhelm can come from just focusing on these things that have been outside of our control all these years. And whether we've talked about that being the economy, other people, any maybe potential future outcomes, even the past, the most grounded of us are going to draw a hard line between what we can influence and what we can't. And so instead of wasting time on uncertainty, we're going to double down on really focusing on our personal power. And again, you're going to make a couple of lists here. One of the things that you can control and one that you can't. And so commit to only taking action on our first list. So going back to that radical acceptance, we're going to stay focused on that list and what is the ones that we can. And if I'm focusing on what I can't control, then I know that I'm in the wrong mindset. So then I can focus over to this other list. And this list can continue to grow. And I suggest that you keep that because as every doubt or every uncertainty comes into your life, other things that you can control and are out of your control are going to show up. You're going to start to see a bit of a pattern. Thinking about worrying about layoffs, that we just talked about James, he can't really control companies' decisions, but he can control how he can build some new skills, right? He can network and he can create multiple streams of income. So he's not solely reliant on one aspect of it. But when we focus on trying to control those external factors, instead of controlling our mindset and our habits and our resilience, then we're going to have a hard time, aren't we? And so here's a quick win for you. Before going to bed, list 3 actions that you took that focused you on what you can control. And the reason why I want you to do this is going to help you reinforce the right habit. And let's go to the third part. We're going to talk about establishing some non-negotiable routines. Why is that important? Because uncertainty just creates mental chaos, doesn't it? Just has us thinking in all different directions and we can get pretty scattered. But a strong daily structure keeps us grounded. And so routine gives us the sense of stability. And even when everything else is going to be unstable, if we have a routine that we can stick to, it's going to help us feel that we have some control over what's happening with us. And so high performing athletes, men, women, anyone who's really a high performer is going to have a morning routine. They're going to have rituals, training, and discipline as their key anchors to help them success and to really develop success in their life. And so start your morning with an intention instead of just reacting to what the day is about to bring. And then really lock in some form of a physical practice. It could be weightlifting, it could be running, it could be stretching. Your body and your mind needs to be conditioned together. And so as we convince ourselves and we get ourselves out of bed in the morning, we start to do things. The more that we do that, we start to build resistance. Everything starts with 1 in a row. So we'll get your 1 in a row started. And most men I can see that when we talk about this stuff is that they're really going to let stress dictate what their schedule is going to look like instead of really having themselves dictate what the schedule should be. And so it's a key nuance for us to pay attention to on who's really dictating that schedule. Are we allowing stress to do that for us, or are we taking control of it? And so design a morning power hour, an hour of time where you're spending with yourself doing things. It could include 15, 20 minutes of meditation, 15, 20 minutes of stretching. Maybe it's 15, 20 minutes of journaling or going for a walk, anything, but developing a power hour that's truly for yourself is a great way to get yourself set up. And so then the next step we're going to talk about is really training our mind for discomfort. Because if we only practice mental strength when life is going to be easy, then we're not going to have it when we need it the most. And so men who are comfortable with discomfort, they can navigate uncertainty better than those who avoid it. And so controlled stress. So things like cold exposure, really popular today now, is doing the cold plunge. Fasting, that's something that I've been practicing here over the last 3 weeks. Endurance training. These types of practices help build real resistance or resilience for ourselves. And so I just talked about the cold showers or some hard physical challenge. I personally have really started to really fall in love with fasting and doing an 18-hour fast. And, I'm going to work my way up to 20 hours here. And just getting into a routine and having that be a consistent part of your lifestyle really helps build some resilience in your life. And so a quick win here, or a quick way to take some action is tomorrow morning, have the cold shower. Maybe start your shower as you normally do, but finish it with a minute or two of cold water so you can help feel that resistance, and you can breathe through it. It'd be a great way to start really building a mental focus. And we can also look at how we're going to reframe uncertainty as a test truly of who we are as our character, because uncertainty really reveals character to us, but we have an opportunity to develop it and to shape it. And so when we see uncertainty as a threat, then it's really going to show up on how we respond. And seeing every challenge as an opportunity is a way for us to improve or to prove to ourselves who we truly are. And so maybe there's some things that the ways you're reacting today that just you're not thrilled about. It's an opportunity for you to adjust and change that, to really shape and hone and develop that character. And so the next time you're facing uncertainty, I'm going to have you ask yourself this question: how would the strongest version of myself handle this? When you ask yourself that, it's going to really change the way you're approaching it. And so instead of focusing on the outcome, you're going to focus truly on your ability, the skill to navigate the process. Because that's where real change is. It isn't in the outcome, it's that journey to that outcome. And so start keeping track of moments in your life when you stepped into uncertainty and thrived. You're going to see that your confidence is going to grow. And so most of us are going to seek uncertainty as something to avoid instead of seeing something that we can master. And I guarantee you that as you start to practice and implement some of these, you're going to see that you're mastering it. And so the next time you're faced with an unknown, and ask yourself this question: why is this this is my proving ground? Let me say that again. The next time you face an unknown, say to yourself, this is my proving ground. And then I want you to take action. There's one thing I want you to take away from today's episode. It's this: is that uncertainty is not your enemy. It's your proving ground. The men who thrive in life, in business, and in their relationships aren't the ones who avoid uncertainty, but the ones who learn to stand firm in the chaos and to make decisions when others hesitate, and to take control of what they can while letting go of what they can't. And so we talked about some myths that keep us paralyzed, the strategies that build resilience, and then mind shifts that turn uncertainty into an opportunity. So now it's time to put it into action. So what are you resisting right now? What situation have you been avoiding because you're waiting for certainty? Your challenge today is simple. You're going to step into the unknown with intention. You're going to apply one of the strategies in this episode and commit to acting despite the uncertainty in your life. And if you're ready to take this even further, if you're serious about becoming the man who leads with clarity and confidence, no matter what life throws at us, then I have a challenge for you as well. I call it the Integrity Challenge. This isn't just another self-help exercise. It's a battle-tested framework that's designed to help you align your actions with your values, develop rock-solid resilience, and become a man who thrives under pressure. So if you're tired of hesitation, self-doubt, playing it small, then this is going to be your next step. I want you to go to members.theawakenedman.net and start the Integrity Challenge today. It's free, it's powerful, and it will change the way you approach every challenge in your life. And so the strongest men don't wait. They're going to decide, they act, they lead. So step up, take the challenge, and start building the man you were meant to be. I want to thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Revolutionary Man podcast. And I can't wait to see you next time. Until then, stay strong, stay grounded, keep leading with purpose. Aho, my brothers.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is the Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.